Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this fireside chat, the first of many global dialogues to be presented by the Howard University Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. It's my honor to welcome you to this discussion. And by introduction, my name is Professor Japa Dawuni. I'm an associate professor of political science at Howard University and the executive director of the newly established Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership at Howard University. This discussion, this fireside chat, is between two distinguished individuals. President of Howard University, Dr. Fane A.I. Frederick, who also happens to be the Charles R. Drew Professor of Surgery at Howard University, and Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the former Deputy President of South Africa and currently the Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UN Women. These two individuals will be discussing today the partnership that has been struck between Howard University and UN Women under the UN Women Initiative He for She that seeks to promote the inclusion of men in the fight for gender equality and the newly established movement by UN Women, Generation Equality. I would like to hand over the discussion now by first making it clear that at Howard University, we have been at the forefront of promoting leadership within all spaces. We have promoted leadership amongst our students, alumni, and faculty. President Frederick will be discussing what Howard University has done in this space. And I think it's important to highlight that one of the greatest ways in which we have contributed to women's place at the decision-making table is the election of Howard alumni, Kamala Harris, as the first woman vice president of the United States. So this discussion is not necessarily to say that women need to be brought to the decision-making table. Howard University has already done it, but we're here to see how we can work together collectively with bringing men to the discussion to address the ways in which masculinities can be brought into discussion, how we can further women's equality and the move for generation equality. So thank you very much to President Frederick and to Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka for being my guest today.
Thank you.
So I'll start off with you, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. We cannot begin this discussion without first talking about the global pandemic. Currently, under your leadership with UN Women, we have seen some progress in advancing women's equality, but the pandemic has had many negative impacts. Please briefly tell us the current state of gender equality globally and how the pandemic has had an impact on the fight for gender equality.
Thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be a guest and on a fireside chat in this webinar with President Fredericks. Thank you for organizing this webinar. We always use the Beijing Platform for Action as a backdrop when we evaluate gender equality, because it is a blueprint that has been endorsed and adopted by all countries in the world. So it enables us to gauge what is happening across the world. And it is now 26 years old. And last year, we did an evaluation of what has happened, and about 176 countries contributed to the evaluation. What we observed is that we had made progress in girls' education, but girls were still dropping out of schools, and there were still girls who were out of schools, especially in countries that were in conflict. But this was not out of lack of trying on behalf of countries. We saw that countries that started at the bottom 26 years ago had made the most significant progress. But I want to emphasize, not enough progress. We also saw that in women's leadership, we were seeing progress. In Beijing in 1995, there were 11 women heads of states in the world. In 2020, there were 22 women heads of state. Progress, but not enough. In parliaments, in 1995, there were about 10 percentage of 10 women parliamentarians on average globally. In 2020, round about 24. Progress, but not enough. So, you know, we've seen the shifts and we are now calling for acceleration of the pace of change. And of course, violence against women, another big issue that we use to gauge progress. We have not made progress there, but we've seen countries trying. In Beijing, there were less than 50 countries with laws that criminalize domestic violence. In 2020, 144 countries are making an effort. Come the pandemic, the levels of violence against women shot up because of the lockdown. Girls' education, where we were trying to battle against dropouts and helping girls in conflict areas, is also a challenge. Girls dropped out of schools. When schools reopened, the increase of girls who didn't go up of schools reached more than 12 million girls. And of course, the reason, child marriage, trafficking, and early pregnancies. And of course, the worst, which is also a crisis in the US, job losses. 2/3 of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic were lost by women, in part because the sectors that are affected, such as the service sectors, have a large majority of women. So we are not in a good place right now, and we need bold measures to try and reverse this trend.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phumzile, for giving us that quick global snapshot. Like you said, progress has been made, but there's still a lot to be done. I turn over now to President Frederick. President Frederick, given that you are the president of Howard University, and as I mentioned, the university that has produced the first woman vice president of the United States, you are also a surgeon, and I will rightly mention the name that you are the Charles R. Dew Professor of Surgery, in addition to your job as the president of Howard University. Howard University has a hospital that serves the community that it's located in, most of whom are people of color. Now, this year, in celebrating International Women's Day, under your leadership, Howard University celebrated the frontline workers at our university. So we acknowledge that women are doing a phenomenal job at the hospital, and we need to celebrate them. Given your knowledge and your interest in leadership, especially in promoting women into leadership, what has been your assessment, or what is your assessment of the impact of the pandemic on women?
Yeah. Well, again, first, thanks for having me. And I want to start off, since I know we have viewers from South Africa, with wishing everybody a happy Freedom Day. I think last Monday, if I'm correct, was Happy Freedom Day. So let's start there. Women have liberated us in many ways. And the pandemic has been another example of how women have played that role. They play that role both in our households and, or I should say in multiple places in our households and our communities. And as you mentioned, as frontline workers. I myself am the product of a woman who was a nurse for some 51 years. And so we see women at every aspect of our society basically saving us, and in a lot of ways, at times saving us from ourselves. So it is absolutely critical. And I think the pandemic has really exemplified and lifted up the role that women play. So that's one aspect. However, I think, as you heard from Dr. Phumzile, there's an issue around the negative impact it has had on them, because it has also stretched them, right? You have lockdowns in schools, you have people at home, and you have an increasing activity of having women playing multiple roles at a very, very stretched capacity. And I think that that's something for us to pay attention to. Would that result in retarding progress because of the number of girls you heard were out of school, and because of the number of women that now had to play multiple roles? So I think we have to be vigilant as we emerge, not so much from the pandemic, but we emerge from the lockdowns, from the economic collapse and the unemployment, to make sure that that disproportionate impact that it may and obviously has had on women isn't permanent, and that we do things and go out of our way to stretch that change. And then on the last point of the leadership, it has always been there. And as you rightly pointed out, our alumna in the middle of this pandemic probably was a silver lining in that cloud, rising to the second highest office in this land was there. But I hope that people will always remember that she got there because of her intellect. She got there because of her education. She got there because of her experience. All the things that we sometimes say men use as their ticket, let's not discount the fact that she has excelled in all of them. And with that, she also brings her female agenda, which makes her better at any of the 48 men who preceded her. So we certainly hope that she is an example and a silver lining in this dark cloud that the pandemic has put on women leadership.
Thank you, President Frederick. Thank you for highlighting that women do bring their merit and their qualities of leadership to the table. So this fireside chat is really to talk about the role that Howard is going to be playing, having joined, under your leadership, President Frederick, having joined UN Women in their program, the He for She campaign. So Dr. Phumzile, if you could kindly tell us what the He for She campaign is about, and then specifically help us to understand the role of men in this campaign in an attempt to promote gender equality globally.
Well, thank you. Let me first thank President Fredericks for raising the hand and joining He for She. He joins a long list of male allies who have joined He for She and demonstrated a positive masculinity and helped to also broaden the debate about gender equality. He for She mobilizes men as allies, men who stand for gender equality. Of course, it is in solidarity with women, not so much to lead women, but to bring together both men and women in a fight for human rights, because women's rights are human rights. We have emphasized in He for She both the importance of bottom-up, in other words, the activism of young men, boys as young as 12 years old, who themselves need to contribute to changing the narrative about gender equality, but also looked at men in positions. We focus on men with authority, power, and resources, whose role is critical for changing the destiny of women in places where these men have got authority and power. We focus on the power of one. If one man who leads an institution fights for equal pay in that institution, game changer for the women who work there. If one man who leads an institution believes in zero tolerance to sexual harassment and sexual violence against women, game changer for women, because he will lead by example, sets out policies and makes sure that there is consequence for wrongdoing. And of course, male allies also will make sure that when women qualify for positions, when women stand up to compete for positions, they will be given a fair chance. And in that way, we see an increase of women participating in different platforms where leadership is critical. So we've seen this in private sector, we've seen this in academic institutions, we've seen this in government and in public sector, but also we are just open for women's leadership anywhere. We see men who are He for She in sports, in the arts, and of course in the community and in civil society. So we welcome Howard University and President Fredericks to this very important platform.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phumzile, for setting the context for us and helping us to understand that the He for She campaign is about solidarity, and it's not that men are taking the role or the place of women. Dr. Frederick, turn it over to you now. Why was it important for you as a leader of Howard University to join the UN He for She campaign at such a moment in time? And how do you see this movement, or at least our joining, being part of the coalition, how do you see that leading to changes, hopefully, for issues about gender equality within Howard and along HBCUs?
Sure, I think you underscored it. It's about solidarity, and it's about standing with and standing by. So the primary reason for joining is to listen and learn, not to try to direct or lead. That's not what I got from the He for She. I think Dr. Phumzile laid that out very, very well when I first spoke to her. She was very clear that this was about solidarity and support. And to do that, we first have to listen. At Howard, this is a very important issue, and it has been during my presidency. When I started, we had 1 permanent dean out of 13. We now have 9 I should say out of 13, and we're about to add another school. We've just had a decanal search, so we may end up with 10 out of 14. I think that's a significant change over a very short period of time. And we have to get that across the entire campus. We've started a STEM scholar program specifically to get the pipeline, and we support a significant number of young women in that program. As a matter of fact, that program is 50 to 60% now made up of young women. And you look at any STEM program in the country, it's one of the best, and they are going on to STEM PhDs. And I can go on and on. It's not perfect. We definitely are not perfect. We're learning. I'm the 17th president. All have been male. I talk a lot about my successor being a woman. And that's not to say that my provost, who's a man, wouldn't be a good president. I talk about it because I think we have to put it in the ether so that we are thinking about it. We sent a woman to the vice presidency in the White House before we sent a woman to this office I'm sitting in. So there's a lot for me to learn, and joining this program is an attempt to help learn that. When I started also, women were less likely to be promoted than men. But just like everything else, if you don't measure it, you're not going to see the impact of it. So we have to certainly make sure that we're doing that. And I think as we do that and we continue to do that, I think we are significant. We are going to change the atmosphere and the environment significantly. So giving voice to those issues is important, making sure that we look at those metrics, that we also put things in place to help with that, to sensitize everyone around us to that as important. And last thing I'd say is I grew up in a department here at Howard as a student and a trainee of surgery that probably has produced more African-American women surgeons than anyone else in the country. And it's not perfect. We still don't have a full professor of surgery in the department who's a woman, and we haven't had a female chair. But when you look across the landscape of the country, nobody has trained more African-American women than we have. So there are pockets of strengths that we've had, and we have to continue to make sure that we improve the weaknesses. And absolutely, we have more to do, and we are committed to doing it. And that's why I'm here, to listen, learn, and to open up the dialogue and be willing to have that dialogue within Howard University and the HBCUs as well.
Thank you, President Frederick. I would like to kindly remind our audience that you can type your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we will hopefully address as many as we can. I would like to follow up with you, President Frederick, on this discussion we just had. You've made it clear that a lot has been achieved, but there's still a lot to be done. But most importantly, that you are here to listen, to learn, and to engage in dialogue. So could you tell us, last year, November, just on the heels of the election, Howard University received a donation which led to the establishment of the first ever Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership at Howard University. Why is this center historic, especially coming under your leadership? And how will the center be positioned to address some of these issues that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I think the center is important. And while you describe it as being under my leadership, I want to be clear that it's under your leadership. And it's born out of your work and your vision and many others in the organization with whom you've collaborated. I often see my job as a job to remove barriers and also to facilitate. And so facilitating the donation was, I think, part of my activity. Why is it important? It is critical, not just important. 70% of our undergrads are women. When we look at the opportunities for our faculty, as I said, for promotions, for leadership, especially decanal leadership, we have to do more in order to ensure that we're going to promote that. But we have to give those things a platform. Oftentimes we can give them platitudes versus a platform. And a platform is important, an area where we can actually study and write about these things and also bring about policy changes is important. Sometimes we know that there are problems, but we don't have that coordinated effort to change it. And that's what Howard has always been about. Our School of Law was a very critical place in the development of Brown versus the Board of Education that desegregated our schools. And so that history here at Howard University is one that we must embrace and promote. And I see this center as one that can really speak to these issues. In this country right now, we have a significant pay gap between men and women. At Howard University, we've taken measures to close that gap, especially among professors and faculty members, to make sure that at every level, we aren't creating gender gaps. And every year, it's something that we actually check. But again, if we don't give these issues a platform and we don't speak to them and try to institute policies, we're going to lose ground. So I see this center as very important. The last thing I would say is, as you were providing the name for the center, there are two things that stood out and struck me. One was that apart from saying women, you use gender. I think that was critical that we do that, because as we look out across the spectrum of the studies that need to be in this area, I think we have to be inclusive. And then the global leadership, I think, is another critical aspect. This is a global issue. This is an issue that we feel that we can impact, not just here in our university, but it's a much broader issue as well. And to have the kind of impact we want to have, being able to partner with places like the UN and leaders like the former deputy president of South Africa is critical, right? Uplifting these leaders and exposing our young people, both men and women, to these leaders is it's going to be a critical part of the success of the center.
Thank you, President Frederick. So I turn over now to Dr. Phumzile. Dr. Phumzile, given that the partnership between Howard University and UN Women is historic, Howard University is the first HBCU to be part of the He for She campaign. What do you see the role of HBCUs generally, starting with Howard University, in working together to promote issues and consciousness around masculinity and work towards generation equality? So what can HBCUs do, and how can we work hand in hand to promote generation equality?
Well, firstly, let me congratulate Howard University for having one of the alumni reach the highest office on the land and be the number 2 in the country. That is no small achievement. It also is inspiring to women of color, not just in the US, but to women all over the world. I mean, I remember in my case, when I became a deputy president, I think the people who were most excited about that position were actually young women who saw this as a validation of the potential they have. It was young women. I was hearing from young women from the whole continent who identified and celebrated this position. So this is exciting because when people do not see people who look like them in high offices, they actually don't see the possibility for them to reach this office. So this act of having people that look like us in these high offices is just one way of encouraging and giving people the hope that they will be able to reach these high offices. So that being said, HBCUs are important institutions to highlight excellence amongst both people of color as well as amongst women. And I'm glad that in Howard, the rates of graduation amongst women is as high as 70%. That too reaffirms and showcases the potential of women. So everywhere where there are HBCUs, like in South Africa, it is important that HBCUs excel, because they help to make the point about the fact that Black people and women should not be associated with mediocrity. The other thing is that we see HBCUs as also custodians of culture and the story of Black people. They are the place where you make sure that people are able to do whatever is done in all other academic institutions, but at the same time, keeping it real, you know, being who they are and being proud of who they are, something that isn't always possible when they are in the other institutions that do not have the history that the historically Black universities have. I have to say, in South Africa, not all of our HBCUs have done well. There is a challenge and a need to really encourage and to push, and also for the alumni of those universities to be present, to assist them to keep the very high standards. I went to an HBCU myself, but I did not finish there because during my time, it was the height of apartheid. So Black universities used to be closed by the regime at the slightest provocation, would be kicked out of university, closed, and would scatter. And in my university, this is what happened. It was in 1976, which tells you I'm very old. It was in 1976, which was the year of the Soweto uprising. And my university closed, and then I ended up, for all kinds of reasons, having to leave South Africa for that time and finishing my bachelor's degree in a neighboring country, Lesotho, at the University of Roma. But I had a taste of the dynamism of being in an HBCU. I think that it would be good that we have some kind of camaraderie of HBCUs around the world so that they can play this central role of retaining our culture, our story, while pushing ahead and representing excellence.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phumzile, for giving us your experiences, having attended partly an HBCU, has historically Black university in South Africa, and as we call them in the US, we add the colleges to it, so we have the HBCUs, but the names are almost the same. And so I think you've made a very strong, clear case on the ways in which we can partner, whether in the United States, in South Africa, or even in Latin America, where we do have some Afro-Latino countries or populations, high populations, so there could be HBCUs there as well. So I turn now to President Frederick. From your perspective as the president of the leading HBCU in the United States, what do you see the role of Howard University and HBCUs in promoting this cross-national dialogue and cooperation across a broad spectrum, but specifically on gender issues?
Yeah, I think we are critical in that discussion. And I think you just made a very good point about how we go about doing that. So whether it's the University of Western Cape in South Africa, where we have a memorandum of understanding, our law school faculty go there once a year, obviously pre-pandemic, and participate in a program that I've had an opportunity to sit in on a couple of classes where they offer law school classes to law students all across the US. They take them all the way to South Africa, and they sit in class with other South African students. And I think it's a great exchange because ultimately, the biggest thing that we can provide is that convening, right? Because you get young people in a room together and that's where the magic happens. We've been to Colombia and signed an MOU as well. That MOU, again, brings our faculty and students together at several universities in Colombia to facilitate that exchange. And as you pointed out, that we don't often talk about that African diaspora in Latin America, where there are millions of Afro-Latinos and Latinas in those countries. And that camaraderie and also that exchange of ideas and learning from one another is very important. Our School of Social Work goes to South Africa every spring and does a project. I mean, that's where the real magic occurs. So our ability to convene and to bring these groups together, I see as a very, very critical component for what we must do. We must have faculty exchanges. We look for faculty exchanges in that. The faculty that are doing research in these different areas get ideas, they get an opportunity to exchange those ideas. And I think that that's a very fulfilling process as well that we must continue to facilitate. And I would say lastly, when we think about that partnership, I want to be clear, we see that partnership in a symbiotic way. There's a lot for us to learn. There's a lot for us to give, but we always want that to be a two-way exchange because there's a lot for us to gather. I remember the first time that I went to UNISA, the University of South Africa, probably one of the largest, if not the largest, correspondence schools in the world. And just walking on that campus and understanding the administrative aspect of it in terms of what they do was humbling. I attended a talk by the then president of South Africa as well. And the entire encompassing of the culture mixed with the mission absolutely resonated with me, having attended an HBCU here at Howard University. I could absolutely understand and see what it provided and how critical it was. And I take that all the way back to my last trip to South Africa when I went to the University of Johannesburg and met with some students. That institution honored our alum, Ambassador Young, and he requested that I come and speak. And again, the exchange of ideas in that on that panel that I sat was unbelievable. Some of the problems are very similar, and some of the problems are different, but the solutions are amazing. And it's amazing how much cross-disciplinary opportunity there is when you get those exchange of ideas.
Thank you, President Frederick, for highlighting some of the existing relationships, even between Howard University and some of the universities in South Africa. And we're looking to build and expand on those. And I like the fact that you mentioned that the relationship has to be symbiotic. It's a give and take and a win-win. So we're looking forward to opening the doors at Howard University under the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. We're looking to build partnerships, not just with universities in South Africa, but globally positioned to address issues that are of mutual interest and benefit the larger population. So I want to take a pause now and pose a few questions that we have in the Q&A chat to my panelists. And there's a question here by an individual who is asking, and I think this question goes to President Frederick, that what can be done to address the issues of masculinities at Howard University and to open up the opportunities for more women in leadership positions. So the person wants to know, what can we do to address masculinity at Howard?
Yeah, and I think there are two things that we have to start with. One is we have to start with an open dialogue. We have to be willing to talk about this, to have a conversation about it, to not sweep it under the rug. I saw a post on LinkedIn the other day when this went up. Somebody was complaining that I promote women too much at Howard, et cetera. There are others who are going to say I don't do enough. So you're always between a rock and a hard place. But what I hope to do is to be a convener of the conversation. We have to first start with dialogue. I think sometimes we want to rush in with solutions, and I don't think that that's always the right way. So we have to get at the root of it. We have to demonstrate to people that there actually is a problem, because although people are living in it every day, unless you provide them with data, they sometimes want to ignore the problem. So we have to be honest that there is a problem and start the dialogue. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is we have to be bold about the solutions and make sure that we're clear. So for instance, the reason we have this many women deans right now is because one of the things that I put in place is that I will not interview finalists for a decanal position unless one was a woman, plain and simple. And if you could not find a woman that was worthy of being the dean, then we should start the search over. And we put things in place such as unconscious bias training and cultural competency training to make sure that people recognize and understand. We try to make the committee's gender balance. So I think there are a multitude of ways in which you could go about not just initiating the conversation, but trying to put and to make sure to make sure that we are going to do the right things to get this to work. And there are going to be vexing problems. We're going to have stumbles along the way. We're not going to get everything right. We certainly haven't. As I said up front, a big part of my joining this effort with the UN is to learn and to listen, and then to try to implement those as well.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question for the participant. And if I may quickly add in that the He for She campaign that Howard University has signed to be a part of will be located in the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. So the programming that will develop out of that will really fall into what President Frederick is talking about: dialogue, open conversations for all stakeholders. And that would also mean that we will engage in research to have data, and the data will drive the solutions. And as you called it, bold solutions. Thank you for answering that for us. I think there's another question here that maybe falls into the first one, and it says, will the center provide baseline data on where women at Howard are in terms of salary, promotion, and leadership? And I'm happy to answer that. Yes, we are engaging in a series of reports, looking at all the departments and all the colleges, the 13 colleges at Howard University, and some departments that will provide this kind of data for us to be able to have the analysis and drive some of the solutions and discussions. So thank you for asking. I think I'm going to take
if I could just add something there. The importance of baseline data in He for She, because we track the progress of the partners in He for She, because we use that as information to encourage new recruits into He for She, but also to show progress and to exchange solutions. We have, out of the work that we've done for with He for She in the last few years, produced a book of solutions. And these solutions are drawn from the work that has been done by the different leaders and grassroots actors in He for She. So it is important that Howard would name what it is that they want to change by becoming a He for She, and how we would track so that annually we are able to share the progress that we make, but also the problems, because also we learn a lot when we're having problems. And one area that we try to emphasize when we work with universities is the need to address campus violence against women. Whatever we do, we would like to make, just as much as we'd like to see leadership as a key component of this journey, but also would like to see a strategy that addresses the issue of violence against women. And of course, we would be there to support and to help, and to also share with you what has happened in the other universities that are He for She. It is an area that is very challenging, but it is an area where it is important to bring male students as ally on board, so that it is not just the women students who are fighting for themselves to protect themselves, while men, muscular, young, able-bodied men fold their hands and look. We would like to make sure that we actually create men who take this issue seriously. And if we consider that men who graduate from university and women are the cream of society, if in that group of people in society, we cannot have people who will not stand and watch violence against women, and worst of all, who themselves will be perpetrators, then obviously we are in big trouble. So we really have to invest a lot of time in trying to make sure that we make them to be the frontline defenders of not defenders of women, because obviously we want women to defend themselves, but people who actually stand in solidarity with women and do not tolerate any violence against women, and do not become perpetrators themselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phumzile, for adding that. And I think I'll shift that question a bit to President Frederick, given that you are a surgeon, someone who has worked in the hospital, continues to work in the hospital as a surgeon, despite your busy schedule as president of the university. So you have seen the numbers, you have seen the victims, maybe somehow. Could you tell us briefly what the Howard University has done in terms of addressing on-campus violence and measures that have been put in place to prevent that?
Yeah, we started a program called Stand Up to try to, one, again, illuminate the message that violence against women in interpersonal relationships can occur, and they are far more likely to be hurt by this, and that we were all standing up against it. So again, I think education was the root of our approach in terms of exposing that this was not tolerable, and also what the roots were and how people can get help around that. And yes, in my career, working as a trauma, doing trauma as part of what I do, you do see people who are victims of domestic violence, et cetera. And I think, as Dr. Phumzile pointed out earlier in the conversation, during the pandemic, especially with the lockdown, people in confined spaces not being able to communicate as easily or even be seen, that has certainly escalated. And so we have to bring more light to it, but we can't just bring light to it. We have to make sure that we have some type of intervention planned to put an end to it. And part of it is educating, and that education has to start early. I have a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, and they take cues from what they see us do and participate in. And my daughter is very, very vocal, and I'm often the beneficiary of her voice around these issues and how we manage it. So I'm always trying to be cautious that the example that I set there is important. And I think that, some of those can be numbers, but to be true to everything, some of it, I think, as Dr. Muhammad was probably asking in the Q&A, is about qualitative issues as well. You can't just measure some of those outcomes in terms of binary numbers. You have to be thoughtful about what is the quality of the engagement, what are the qualitative impacts that someone is having. Is someone less likely to speak up and feel comfortable, pursue a certain path because they don't feel welcomed, or they feel that people are going to get in their way? And that's a sentiment that you can only get if you used mixed methods and qualitative research methods to approaches to clean that data, because we also have to make sure we create an environment. And I think the other thing I would say is that culturally, a place like Howard University has students at any given time from almost 50 different countries and almost all the states. So the cultural exposure of everyone is also very different. And we also have to recognize that as we bring people into our culture, it's made up of two things. It's made up of the people and the tolerated behavior. The people are a mixed group, so we have to give voice to everyone. But the tolerated behavior must have one standard by which we all should live by. And as we all live by that one standard, we should then, be able to make progress as long as we agree that this is the tolerated behavior, and that tolerated behavior has to be set with a very, very high bar.
Thank you for that, Dr. Frederick. And I think that tolerated behavior and the institutional culture is what we hope to achieve with the He for She campaign at Howard University. And you've emphasized it several times. It's about dialogue, conversations and meaningful conversations. Thank you. And I would like to once again ask very quickly, Dr. Frederick, in the discussions we had prior to you joining the He for She, we talked with different stakeholders at Howard University. And one of the groups we talked to were students who belong to organizations that focus on LGBTQI issues. And the students were very vocal that they needed to be present in these discussions because students within that community also face different levels of violence. And so with the He for She, how can we expand that to be inclusive of our LGBT community at Howard University?
Yeah, I think I'm very glad that you touched on this, because I think even in terms of our nomenclature, with all good intentions, and I had a mentor who said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And even in using the pronouns he and she, I think we have to also be cautious, right? It's not meant to exclude anyone, because we recognize that the gender spectrum, especially as represented by LGBTQIA, is different, and it's expanding, and we have to embrace that. So again, I think your center in particular has to embrace that aspect of the study. And I think very early on when you and I spoke, I was very clear about that. We have to give voice to that community. We often talk about this around the issue of the students, but we also must recognize that our faculty and staff are a very important part of that community as well. And they often don't have a space to go into. I'll take the opportunity to also just give my opinion about safe spaces. I don't want us to retreat to safe spaces and leave the other spaces unsafe. So I don't often talk about safe spaces, because I worry that when we say that, we're giving other people the opportunity to gather in the spaces that we are leaving because they're unsafe, and to continue to make them unsafe. All of the spaces need to be safe for all of us. And so the other reason why it's important for that inclusivity is to make sure, again, that we're giving platform and agency to everyone. And the bottom line here is to amplify all of our humanity, right? That's the bottom line, for us to have an appreciation of the humanity in everyone. And so that community, the LGBTQIA community, I think is going to be an important voice, and is going to educate us about how we can move forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frederick, for helping us to understand that all spaces have to be safe for women and for other gender identities along the spectrum. Thank you. So we're winding down to the conclusion of this wonderful dialogue. We thank all our participants for their engaging questions and suggestions, and we're looking forward to having as many partners as possible. So please remember to stay in touch. The center will officially be launched sometime in the fall semester, and we hope that you will join us for that celebration. And we are looking to build partners across the university, across the world, to promote the common destiny of humanity. So I would like to turn over now to Dr. Phumzile to ask you to give us your closing remarks for this fireside chat, and what you want to send as your message to our panelists and everyone in terms of He for She, gender equality, and generation equality.
Well, just to thank our participants, and to thank you, Madam Moderator, for captaining this ship, and for your enthusiasm, which made it possible for us to join with Howard University in He for She, and to also have President Fredericks as our brand new He for She. We are going in a phase of generation equality, which is a campaign that is focusing on accelerating change, given the fact that change has been uneven and slow. My parting words is to ask as many of you, wherever you are, to join generation equality. You can join through He for She, be a He for She that is focused on accelerating change. If you are a man in particular, there is room for you to support generation equality by the activities that He for She will expose you to. And of course, I would like Howard University to challenge other HBCU all over the world to be part of drivers of gender equality, as well as to be he for she's. So President Fredericks, I throw the challenge to you.
Sure. You know, with that, I guess I'll take that up. You know, I want to be very clear and underscore that I am here to listen and learn. We don't have all the solutions. Like I said, we sent a woman to the White House before we sent a woman to this office. So while we have been on a caravan to social justice for 154 years, I recognize that there's so much more that we can do, and that progress will never be applauded or appreciated by everyone. Everyone is going to have a different level of impatience about it, and everyone has a suggestion of how we should get there. I recognize that. But one of my responsibilities, which is never popular, is I have to make decisions about what directions we take, and we can't be all things to everyone, but we have to have focused ideas and strategies in order to make any kind of progress. And like I said, I've highlighted some of the progress we've made, recognizing that we still have a lot more to do. And so, you know, our participation here in He for She is to support, to stand in solidarity, and to listen and learn, and to take those learnings back to change it. My role with the center is to give a platform to Dr. Dewani's work and others, so that we can bring transparency to some of these issues and also progress. My intent is to look back 20 years from now when my successor, whoever she is in this role and is celebrating Dr. Dewani's success and the center, and comparing the data we will put out now to the data some 20 years from now, and showing that, you know, we've certainly made progress. And so I give agency to everyone around these issues, and I hope that we will continue to amplify everybody's humanity, because that's one of the reasons why Howard is here.
Thank you very much, President Frederick, for taking that challenge. So we have the Phumzile and Mlambo Ngoka and Frederick challenge to push forward generation equality, to achieve gender equality at Howard University, among HBCUs and globally, and most importantly, to fight towards humanity, good humanity. So once again, I thank all our attendees very much. Thank you for all the questions, the dialogue that we've had. I know that we couldn't get through all of them. I just want to highlight very quickly that Dr. Phumzile, you have a question in the box, which for the sake of time, I'll let you answer. I type it to the person, but Ambassador Swanee Hunt has highlighted the issue of trafficking in persons, which is also one that falls broadly under the question of gender-based violence and other forms of heinous crimes. And so she would like to see how that can be addressed by generation equality, and I'll let you maybe have that dialogue with her. So thank you all for joining us. As President Frederick said, the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership at Howard University is beginning now to, it's going to be established, hopefully launched officially in the fall. We have great programs, but this is where I want to send this note, that we are open for business with people who share the values of excellence, fighting for the humanity of all, and making the world a better place. Reach out to us. We are open to dialogue. We are open to engagements. We are open to partnerships that will promote issues of women and gender rights around the world. So welcome, everyone. Keep in touch. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the day, the night, the weekend, and we hope you will join us again for our next Global Dialogue series. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.